spring of 845, the air was cool, but the first warm rays of the sun began to stretch out, warming the land. The strong northern wind, familiar to these lands, was met with unusually great excitement. On the horizon, between the fog and the cloudy skies, a dark mass suddenly appeared. It wasn't just an ordinary cloud, it was a fleet, grand and dangerous, moving down the rivers of France. Thousands of Vikings, led by the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok, were preparing for one of the most famous expeditions of the time, the raid on Paris. For the Vikings, with their deep sense of fate and penchant for exploration, this was not just an attack. It was a declaration of their power on foreign soil. Ragnar Lothbrok, who had gained fame through his raids in England and other parts of Europe, knew that action had to be swift and decisive. He assembled an enormous fleet of over 120 ships, long and fast like the Drakkar, with their dark sails and wooden hulls crafted to penetrate the most inaccessible river mouths. The Vikings knew that the Frankish kingdom, ruling the Carolingian Empire, was suffering from internal instability. The empire was experiencing serious divisions among the three sons of Louis the Pious. This provided a perfect opportunity for skilled raiders to strike. By the end of spring, Ragnar and his fleet approached the shores of France. Expecting resistance, he was ready to act quickly and ruthlessly. On March 28, 845, his ships raised their sails, and the fleet lined up along the Seine River, slowly but surely moved toward Paris. Paris in 845 was a fortress, protected by massive walls and situated on an island in the Seine River. The Frankish king, Charles II the Bald, was not expecting his capital to soon become the target of a fierce siege. The city, despite its strategic importance, was still unprepared for such an attack. The Vikings arrived at dawn in the early days of April. Ragnar led his fleet into the Seine River, setting fire to everything in their path. Using small raiding parties, they attacked the small villages along the way. The burning villages along the riverbanks served as a clear warning of what was to come for Paris. People fled in panic, trying to escape the oncoming storm, unaware of the death marching toward them. When the Vikings reached Paris, they were met by the city's formidable walls. The Frankish defenders were ready to face them, but the odds were not in their favor. Ragnar's army began the siege, attacking the walls with their traditional methods: ladders, catapults, and fiery arrows. Meanwhile, King Charles II was in another city, and the defense of Paris depended on the strength and resolve of the local defenders and their army. Autumn of 845 was a time of desperation for the people of Paris. They had managed to hold off the Vikings' attacks for a long time, but more and more resources were being drained in the defense. The conditions became increasingly hopeless. Ragnar Lothbrok was not just a destroyer, he was a wise strategist. Seeing that the siege was dragging on and understanding that the Franks might eventually request peace, he decided to employ his famous maneuver. While continuing the attacks, Ragnar opened negotiations with King Charles II. By December 845, after months of destruction and near depletion of the city's supplies, the Franks had little choice left. King Charles II was forced to agree to Ragnar's demands. In exchange for peace and the end of the siege, the Franks were to pay a colossal tribute, 7,000 silver coins. This was an enormous sum for the time, enough not only to buy peace, but to save the lives of many in the city. Ragnar Lothbrok, having received his payment, left Paris, but his actions marked a turning point in Viking history. Paris, as well as other cities in Europe, had become, for a time, not just a target for raids, but a symbol of the fragility of feudal kingdoms, who once believed in their invulnerability. Ragnar, despite his victory, was not satisfied with just the tribute. This victory became an important milestone in his legend. It was after this campaign that the Vikings began to realize their role not just as sea pirates, but as mighty conquerors capable of dictating terms on the very soil of Europe. Autumn of 845 became a time when Ragnar Lothbrok left his mark in the history of France. His raid on Paris, though not a complete victory, became a significant event for all of Europe and left lasting memories in the centuries to come. After this raid, it became clear that the Vikings were not just a myth. They were a serious force that must be reckoned with. The raid on Paris in 845 was one of the brightest and most memorable episodes of Viking conquest. It showed that the strength of the Vikings was not limited only to their maritime strikes, but also to their ability to craft